management in Kenya. So welcome to all of our colleagues in Kenya, and then whoever else that we connect with on LinkedIn this afternoon. What's happening this afternoon? So we're talking about digital commerce and how it continues to expand across Africa, Kenya in specific, and we're going to focus on how this is transforming the landscape in Kenya. With increased internet connectivity or penetration, mobile money innovation, especially Kenya, and growing base of digital consumers, e-commerce is booming. It is reshaping traditional supply chains, and it's redefining how goods are sourced, moved, and delivered. But with opportunity comes disruption. From last mile delivery bottlenecks to inventory volatility, logistics inefficiencies, e-commerce has introduced a new set of challenges and possibilities for businesses operating in Kenya's dynamic market. In today's session, we are going to focus on, or we're going to explore how e-commerce is disrupting the traditional supply chain models, the role of technology and data in navigating these disruptions, innovative strategies businesses are using to stay agile and resilient, and we're going to look at the future and what it holds for supply chain professionals in this fast evolving ecosystem. Now, whether you're in retail, logistics, manufacturing, or technology, this conversation is crucial for anyone looking to stay competitive in a digitally first economy. We're excited to have with us a panel of industry experts and leaders who have deep insights into the Kenyan market and the global supply chain trends. I'm now going to take the opportunity to introduce the gentlemen to you this afternoon. And in no particular order, we have Daniel Leston, who is the Group Operating Director at House of Procurement. He brings over 15 years of global experience leading transformative technology solutions across supply chains, from working with IBM, Ernst & Young, and Fujitsu, to overseeing a 200 million euro transport budget at Full Flow Logistics. Daniel's expertise spans automotive, pharma, and retail industries. He holds an MBA from Oxford and is passionate about technology-driven supply chain transformation. Next up, we have John Kurani. John is an executive leader and professional with 24 years experience in digital transformation, sales management, business development, product innovation, strategic partnerships across sub-Saharan Africa. He has a passion for innovation and digital transformation in collaboration with high-performing teams and strategic ecosystem engagements. He has held leadership roles in the telco industry at Safaricom, Telkom Kenya, high tech at Intel Corporation, and digital finance services at FinServe Africa, and MasterCard. He graduated with a BSc in International Business Administration in Marketing from UCL, an MBA from the University of Sunderland, and a chartered marketer with a postgraduate diploma from the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK. Eric serves as the Vice Chair of the Board of the Chartered Institute of Marketing in Kenya, and is also passionate about creating an impact in education and the learning journey of students, encouraging them to leverage a growth mindset, and he influences all of this. He serves as the technology and innovation lead at Nova Pioneer Tatu Primary Parents Association Board, and served as the judge at the Nova Pioneer High School's Shark Tank competition. And our final panelist this afternoon is Eric Matuturi. Eric is the Director and Solutions Architect at MasterCard, leading the design of complex payment solutions across East and West Africa. With over 20 years of experience in fintechs, telcos, and digital transformation, Eric has launched high-impact digital and pay-on-demand solutions and partnered with governments to promote financial inclusion. He's a chartered marketer, board advisor, and an advocate for sustainable SME growth throughout digital transformation. So you can see we have highly esteemed gentlemen on the call with us. who's going to give us a sense of what the transformation landscape in the supply chain and procurement sector looks like in Kenya. So without further ado, I'm sure you're all looking forward to the thoughts of these and the insights from these gentlemen. So let's start on starting to look at what that landscape actually looks like. So the first question I'm going to throw towards you, gentlemen, is really focusing on your global experience and what specific e-commerce disruptions you are already seeing influence supply chains in Kenya. So anyone, whoever feels free, up goes your hands, and then I'll throw the floor open to you. All right. I saw Eric go up first, then I think I saw John, and I'll drop to Daniel thereafter. So Eric, let me open up the floor to you and gather your thoughts.
Thank you, Nishan, and everyone on the panel. Thanks for the invitation. Just building up on what you said, I mean, if you look at the global shifts, so just mentioning one thing you talked about around mobile penetration, you'll notice that, especially in Kenya or even in Africa, the number of mobile subscribers has grown quite significantly, with Kenya at about 68 million users. And out of that 68 million, we have about 27 who actually use the mobile internet. So we are talking more of a mobile fast economy. So we're seeing a shift in terms of how people buy and order or purchase their products or even pay for them using their mobile devices. So I think that is a big focus that organizations have to look at as they look at their supply chain systems, which also influence how customers will make their payments. We are seeing a lot of direction. If you look at the different e-commerce platforms around, people actually asking to pay on delivery and not upfront. So the mobile first direction, I think, is a big disruption for how companies need to look at their supply chain systems.
Oh, fantastic, Eric, and some interesting stats there. 68 million growth, 27 million mobile internet usage. So that's already just giving you a sense of what that landscape looks like and the opportunity that kind of sits behind that. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Eric. Let's jump over to John, and then I'll lead into Daniel thereafter.
Yeah, just to clarify, I think you introduced Eric twice, but that's okay. I took some of that introduction. Currently blessed to be the chairman of the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. I also worked across various sectors, especially Coca-Cola, where the term for last mile delivery was a big term for us. So I think Eric really set it up very well in the sense of, you look at Kenya, you've got more phones than the population. That tells you something. Many people have two phones, maybe for the other network, because sometimes the transactions are happening more on what we call M-Pesa, which is the local platform that's become almost Pan-African. And then they make phones on the data on the other phone, the Airtel or so-called. So I think that's what makes people kind of have two phones. So I think the way Eric has put it is very appropriate. I no longer go to the bank. I don't know. My wife is very different from me. She wants a face-to-face, see the person, so she's that. So you talk about the generation right now that we have right now, where you can only reach them through a telephone, the mobile apps. I grew up with Facebook. My kids tell me, Dad, that's too old. You need to be on Telegram. You need to be all these other things. So what does that tell you? It's completely reformatting the way we communicate, especially to the group called Gen Z. And so if we don't shape our communication to speak to this particular emerging audience, who are, we used to sing they're the people of the future, the leader, they're actually here. And they want us out. Actually, they are keen to get rid of us and quickly take their space of leadership. We still feel we have something we can offer them, but I can tell you technology, especially artificial intelligence, these guys wake up at 3 and they have a lot of money. They work in their bedroom. They don't leave the bedroom. They use their laptop. All they need is internet and the gadget. They do amazing things creating business. So what am I telling us is that if we don't shape up as companies, as institutions, to this emerging population, we will not reach them. I come from an area also where I'm also the chairman of the Bible Society in East Africa. And we're saying people no longer read the hard copy Bible. They have it here in their phone. Why is your Bible today on Sunday? It's all here. And they read the Bible. They actually have it. So if you don't reach them where they are on the digital platforms, because that's where they operate in that arena, will not touch them. So we have to really recalibrate our communication strategy, our outreach programs to reach these people where they are. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic, John. But before I hand over to Daniel, let me just actually do you justice, right? John is actually the chairman of the council of the Kenya Institute of Supply Management with 27 years experience. He's led strategic procurement at Coca-Cola across 39 different countries, including one of the most complex transformations in the company's global history. A recipient of the Morn Star of Burning Spear Award, John is also a certified coach and a strong advocate for elevating procurement as a strategic function. So John, thank you. Hopefully that does you a little bit more justice, sir. Thank you. And let's jump to Daniel. Daniel, floor's open to you.
Thank you very much, Nishan. And yeah, very nice to share the panel with John and Eric. Very nice to meet you. As we are all of us in Nairobi, hopefully we can meet face to face over a table. I'm sure that Nishan can even promote it. So I'm going to focus on. I think the comments and the points that we had are very valid. Definitely, how we reach the consumers, it has changed. That's one key element. But if I go to the question and I focus on what is the impact that is having on the supply chain, my thought would be the following ones. When we talk about e-commerce, we talk about the digital space, the digital layer, which has some specific characteristics. No, is the ubiquity. So it's anywhere, it is there. The immediacy, the user experience has changed, the expectation has changed, and all of them is data driven. So I think that maybe there are some other characteristics, but those three characteristics is already give a high level view of the characteristics of the e-commerce. So immediacy, ubiquity, the customer journey has changed, and it's data driven. And the data driven, if I stop on it, for retail it is very important. You need to know what your customers are buying. But when you come to e-commerce and you have a digital layer, the amount of data that we manage and the amount of data that we are exposed to is much greater, isn't it? When you have a brick and mortar store, you may see what people are buying. When you have a digital platform, a digital store, you know what they are buying, but you also know what they are looking for. You can look at the correlation between things much higher. So that is definitely one element that is key for the supply chain in terms of forecasting, in terms of inventory management. So that would be one key element that we bring. So how we make data-driven decisions through the digital channel. Another one is in terms of the customer journey and the behavior. What we normally tend to see as consumers, also as businesses, are more frequent purchases. Okay, so our smaller size, higher number of purchases than what we have in the traditional retail. Okay, so that obviously has a pressure on margin. Okay, so that has to be taken into consideration, and there has to be strategies to address that one. The expectation that I was saying definitely changed. The expectation on time to delivery, the expectation of immediacy, I think they are there. Another element could be the network design. Okay, that is definitely a key impact, how we design distribution and supply chain network when we are talking about an e-commerce. Also, the role of the stores, eventually for companies that have mixed strategies, both a digital e-commerce and traditional stores, the role that a store may play in that scheme. Another element is the reverse logistics. That we think about the reverse logistics, which is complicated and tends to increase in the case of the e-commerce. It's a very complicated part of the supply chain, I would say, costly. So that one is definitely an important one. And then the last mile delivery, the last mile distribution, the last mile infrastructure. And for that one, if I focus in Kenya and compare it to Europe, where I come from, I'm originally from Spain, I would say that it is more complicated. If we look at the cities, the urban areas, they tend to be more congested in many cases, and in the rural areas, the condition of the roads are not great. In many cases, which make it more complicated. Maybe just to give an idea, I think that we may see in Kenya here, Madrid is a city with around Kenya to Nairobi, surface. But the difference is that in Madrid, we have every single day, we have 2 million citizens going in the subway. So there's a lot of people that are removed from the ground, freeing out space for the logistics. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop here for these first comments.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Daniel. So some of the things that I kind of picked up from what you were saying was that customers are influencing supply chains, right? Based on their behavior and the data that's coming out of that. Those are things that need to be considered in terms of how you're designing your supply chains. It also helps with forecasting, inventory management. But interestingly enough, you also throw in a few pieces around complexity and things like reverse logistics and geographies that are also impacting supply chains. So and thank you for those insights. I'm going to take it a little bit further on the same question and kind of focus now a little bit on the future of that. So we've seen how it's currently impacting. How do you think it's going to impact in the future? So what are things that you're seeing coming down in terms of trends that you think are going to impact supply chain management and procurement? John, I see you, and then
I can go here. Yeah, okay, so I think again, I always say, unfortunately, the future is here already. So we always think what's going to be the future, but the future is right here. I think what Daniel talked about is around changing consumer expectations. They expect literally it's no longer same-day delivery, it's immediate delivery. That sense of immediacy, and then there's a need about how do we vary, greater call it product variety, so to speak. That's what consumers want. They actually want more variety, and that increases complexity. Complexity in terms of what we offer and complexity in what we actually can produce as industry people. And then there's this issue around complete visibility, real-time tracking. And I order something today, and I always want to follow. Where is my... And nobody orders anything, it's all online. So you want to say, well, it left somewhere in Spain, left Madrid, now it's at the port in Barcelona, is on its way to coming to Africa. So that calls for agility, that calls for responsiveness, that calls for customer centricity. So I can tell you just around the whole customer mapping, it completely has to change how we look at the customer and the consumer, so to speak. So that aspect of how we used to think customers come to us, we have to reach them now. And how do we do that? Through the various means that we can do. So again, this issue around visibility is something I want to dig deeper into. For us, I come from the world of Coca-Cola for a long time, where I worked for many years. Demand for real-time data. Data is going to be the king, and visibility. So they always say, data is going to be the king. They always say that data is the new oil or the new gold, so to speak. Because that would give us ability for us in the manufacturing sector, ability to monitor inventory levels, ability to track shipments accurately, ability to predict and respond to disruptions. When you talk, I think this topic about disruptions, data is the only way you can actually be able to predict predictive analytics, which can now inform decisions, data-driven decisions, so to speak. Let me pause at that, but those two issues, among others, that's going to be really evolving as we continue in this increasingly disrupted arena we're working in, is things we have to be very, very wary about. Thank you, Nishan.
No, fantastic, John. I mean, very key insights there, right? The behaviors have shifted from just buying online to making sure that it comes through immediately. and product variety. So people can actually get online and look at a multitude of different things and at their fingertips, right? Real-time delivery, that's also very critical. So here in South Africa, we have something called Checker 6060. You order and within 60 minutes, you got your delivery at your door, right? So you get that sense of that immediateness. And to give you some personal examples, I purchased some stuff off Alibaba and I purchased some stuff off Temu. Alibaba, I could see all of the tracking, and this is what you're talking about, real-time data as it was going through customs, all of those things, I could see it. But Alibaba took a month to get to me. Temu took, I think it was about a week and a half to get through to me from literally the same part of the world, China, right? So again, that kind of shows how supply chains are kind of changing and how rapidly they have to change to meet consumer demands. So fantastic. Thank you so much for that, John. Daniel, the floor is open to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, one of the beauty of this space is that really it needs to bridge, it's a bridge between the digital space and the real world physical space. So that's a very interesting place to work, to design, to conceive, and it makes me very interested. So on that regard, I would point to certain opportunities that I think will happen. I mean, going to your question of how e-commerce is changing the way of supply chain operate, and specifically in Kenya, I think you were asking. So what I see is just mainly opportunities, because definitely the networks had to be redesigned. The way the supply chain networks are work for digital-led retail is different. And from that perspective, that configuration and those investments are still not there. And I'm going just to point to one that we see happening, which is the distribution centers nearby the main cities. Okay, this is a key element in this e-commerce digital-led retail experience. You have to be close. You have to have enough stock, enough variety of products nearby the cities. So all that infrastructure is still to be built. And I think that I would just stop on that element. What I'm trying to say is that the e-commerce, it has a digital layer. It's very important. It requires significant investment. But later we have to distribute. We have to bring the physical items to our consumers. And therefore, it has requirement for the design of the supply chains. And here in Kenya, there's still a big opportunity for those that really understand where the consumer are and how would you reach them and how you stock your inventory and so on and so forth.
Oh, fantastic. So a nice one there. Really understanding the consumers, where the consumers are, more specifically, because that's what the supply chain network is all about. But interestingly, you also talk about this, you being the bridge between whatever platform they're purchasing off versus actually delivering to the consumer. So you that link in between. But that link in between requires sufficient investment to be able to enable that link. All right, so that very, very, very beautiful insights in there, Daniel. So thank you so much for that. Let's just check if we have any more comments. No more comments. Eric?
Yeah, when you mentioned your experience with Alibaba and that platform you talked about, it just reminded me about a shift we're seeing from within the traditional supply chain actors. So, for example, right now there are some who are actually getting into the fintech space, whereby using digital platforms, they actually link the customer to marketplaces. So I'll give an example. There's a company called Kentex, there's another called Aquanto, whereby you order on Amazon in the US, UK, or even China, and they give you an account that enables you to have an address in the US. So you order on Amazon, it's delivered to an address in the US, and they ship it to your home in Nairobi. So, and all that you can, like John mentioned, be able to track it all the way from the moment it lands in their warehouse to the point where they're actually asking how to make payment and deliver it to you. So that there's a big trend in terms of now supply chain companies being able to say, oh, there's a new segment we can get into whereby we link the customer to where they buy and how we deliver it to them.
Oh, fantastic. Again, a reiteration of being that link and the critical nature of that link and making sure that link doesn't actually break. So thank you for that case study there, Eric. I'm going to jump a little bit further on now. Now we're going to focus a little bit on procurement. But we've kind of gotten a sense of where Kenya currently is. We kind of have a sense of where we're heading to in terms of trends in the supply chain perspective, globally as well as Kenya. So thank you for those shares on both the global context and the local context. But let's jump a little bit into challenges, right? So what are some of the challenges that procurement, supply chain kind of poses to businesses in Kenya? Let's get some of your thoughts around that. Okay, Daniel, I see your hand up next. John, I see you go next.
Want to go first? Daniel can go.
Yeah.
Daniel, you're the visitor.
Thank you. Thank you. So challenges. Yeah, I was thinking about, it's not specifically for the supply chain, but not the procurement, but general challenge for the economy here in Kenya and Africa, which is the cost of capital. That's an underlying challenge. What I'm raising it is because Kenya, I couldn't be able to speak about every single African country, but definitely Kenya is an import-led economy. It imports a lot of things. So that one has an impact in the supply chain and in procurement. Specifically, right now we see all the international trade disruptions, supply chain disruption because of the geopolitical situation. That's definitely something that is impacting. Okay, so that it is a big challenge coming from the fact that it's an imported economy. Also, the currency changes. Because of that, sometimes the stability of the currencies are not there. So that also have an impact on how we update prices, how we can maintain the prices that we have set. That definitely a challenge. But I would even go to my first point, which is affecting the procurement, but all the economy, which is the cost of finance. I think that is a major challenge. And the positive thing that I'm seeing is the new flow of capital coming from these southern countries to Africa. I think that's very, very interesting. Also because they are countries that has a similar context to what the African countries have, and therefore they are able to better measure the actual risk of doing business here. And they have a solution that have already been proven in those geographies. Right now, in our case, for instance, we are leveraging and we're tapping on a lot of capital and supply chain financing lines from India. Okay, for instance. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there. So, but definitely one big challenge is the fact that it's an import-led economy and all that it means, and then a general challenge, which is the cost of capital.
Yeah, fantastic. So some nice reiterations there. Cost of capital, import-led, the geopolitical tensions that are causing chaos in supply chains globally, right? I think we're all seeing it. I think the African continent is feeling it more so than most other continents because we tend to be import-led. We tend to export a fair bit out of our country in terms of industrials, materials, minerals, and then we tend to purchase it back from the rest of the world once it's actually manufactured, right? Which is something that we need to think about. So maybe that's something that we as governments or as the African continent should think about how we build our capability locally rather than going internationally. But interestingly enough, you also mentioned the currency fluctuations, and that as well is impacted by geopolitical tensions across the globe. So I think there's multiple things that are kind of impacting us at the moment. So thanks, Daniel.
And also because of the fact of being an import-led economy, you may be growing, but if all that you're growing is just to buy things from outside, your currency will depreciate. So that's a self-fulfilling dynamic, right?
Yep, no, 100%. You have a bigger deficit in your economy because you're taking more out than actually bringing in. So, no, thank you. John, let's get your thoughts.
I think, Daniel took away my point, which is we have actually, I must reiterate that Africa generally, and they've said, we've been too dependent on India and on China, so to say, as our factory. The factory of the whole world is China, unfortunately. And when disruption comes like COVID happened, we thought we'd learn. We thought we'd learn and try to develop our own local manufacturing capability. Unfortunately, we did not learn. We're back to business as usual. And I think Daniel has put it very well. We are, the word I like quoting is, we have become a trading economy. Everything is, including matchsticks, including, and I'm sad to say this, small pieces of soaps all come from China. I was blessed to be recently in a place called Indonesia. Indonesia has about 300 million people, and they actually penalize you for importing. The tax on importation is probably 200 times more. They want to localize as much as they can, and so they've been very intentional in supporting local supply, local manufacturers, so to speak. And even if you come like with your say iPhone manufacturer, you within 3 years they give you time to bring in the technology, develop the local capital people to now be able to make that same phone in Indonesia itself. And I think, unfortunately, that's where we've actually inherited a very, very interesting culture where we literally, as you say, Kenya is probably one of the largest exporter of tea, raw tea leaves. We get it back from the UK at 100 times the price, It's amazing. It doesn't make any sense to me. So that tells you that we have completely refused to learn from the fact that the raw material that we own actually informs and feeds the industries up in the West, and we end up importing the same items at 10 times the price. But there's hope. There's hope for us in trying to do the African regionalization of production. And the COVID taught us that we can actually create centers of production where we have the Southern Africa hub, the Eastern Africa hub, the Western Africa hub, having what I learned in my economics, comparative advantage of economics. What is the advantage? What can we do in East Africa? Can we focus on tea processing, for instance? Can the other people in West Africa focus on cocoa, for instance? And then we continue leveraging on each other's best capacities and capabilities. If we can do that and now really remove there's this thing called Africa Continental Free Trade Area, you would have thought that AFTA would be the opportunity that we've been waiting for. I can cross from Europe somewhere in say Turkey all the way to Spain or Portugal, somewhere there by road within probably a few days. No problem at the border, no cross-border challenges. But we have just crossed from Kenya to Ethiopia, for instance. You'll be stuck at the place called Moyale. You're going to Tanzania here at the border crossing. You cannot go there. So our own, and unfortunately, what I want to call the customs barriers, we've created our own barriers. We created our own currency barriers. Europe have one currency, Eurozone. They can trade across Europe. We cannot do that in Africa. So even though we want to actually create a more open economic zone in Africa, unfortunately, we are our own worst enemy. It's unfortunate that the historical thing that we inherited. It's unfortunate that we actually continue perpetuating it by not really being open to create that kind of common currency, cross-border dynamics. And then there's a new thing called sustainability that's come in. Sustainability is a new demand I come from the world of Coca-Cola, for instance. Green, eco-friendly packaging, green logistics, circularity in economics, because I can tell you this is no longer the future. It's actually now. The demand for more eco-friendly products is real right now. And I'm happy to say that I'm in Kenya right now. I'm leading an initiative which is led by the government to ensure sustainable public procurement. How do we do that? How can we ensure that we actually motivate people, manufacturers, to actually produce eco-friendly products, eco-labeling, those type of things. So it's a whole challenge. It's going to be more costly, but I believe that with the right intention, Africa can be self-sufficient in production. Thank you.
Yeah, so some absolute gems there, John. Before I hand over to Eric, right? The very first thing that you kind of said was we actually lost an opportunity. COVID gave us an opportunity. We did not take the opportunity. We didn't learn our lessons from that, which is kind of our failing, right? We could have actually created our own supply chains, our own networks. We created our own infrastructure, manufacturing, so all the way this thing from what would they call farm to table kind of thing, right? We could have actually done that for ourselves. But then you also kind of said things like policy is driving behavior, and you gave us the example of Indonesia. And that's kind of the way that we should be kind of thinking. So governments to kind of come together, because that's when you then started leading into our thinking. If we have an African strategy, we might be able to overcome a lot of the challenges that we face. We have started out on the first leg of that, which is kind of the Africa Free Trade Policy, right? And if I'm not mistaken, that was announced in 2024. So I know it hasn't gotten the legs that it needs to just yet, but we'll cross fingers and hope that we have the right people sitting behind driving that policy, because you're 100% right. The more we are able to trade as a continent amongst ourselves, the more stronger and efficient we will be here on the continent, like the European continent is, like the American continent is as well. So absolute gems. Thank you, John. Let's jump over to Eric, and Eric, floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah. So as you look at procurement and as e-commerce grows and procurement moving to the digital age, it moves into the cyberspace, which presents cyber risks. So cybersecurity is a very big challenge, and it's something that anyone in the procurement space that is going digital needs to look at. If you look, it's estimated that about 44 billion was lost in fraud through e-commerce last year. So it's an area that companies need to look at very seriously. Things like identity theft, things like chargeback fraud. Those are areas that are big challenges, and it's something that I believe companies need to be very careful at and invest in tools and solutions that actually prevent those kind of risks.
That's an absolutely sparkling thing there, Eric, because I think we have this massive challenge, like you say. It's not just here on the continent. This is global, and cybersecurity poses probably one of the biggest risks to every industry, and more particularly here because there's the opportunity for fraud. And if I heard you correctly, I think you said 44 billion lost in fraud last year, right? Now that's a massive amount. I mean, if you think about 44 billion being lost into fraud, that could have been 44 billion invested back into the economy, back into the sector, but that's now subsequently gone. And the fraud could have been committed outside of the continent. It doesn't necessarily have to have been fraud that was perpetrated right here, right? So the investment for that as well. And I think Daniel was speaking about investment as well. Investment is not just infrastructure in terms of the physical infrastructure, but it's also infrastructure to protect your networks, to protect your customers or your consumers, and the data that sits behind that, right? So no, again, very interesting. Thanks, Eric. Nice gem there. Let's kind of shift it away from challenges and get a little bit more, how can I say, positive, all right? So how can supply chains in Kenya, or leaders of supply chains in Kenya, kind of reposition supply chains, procurement, and become more strategic and proactive? So we know these are some of the challenges. We know there needs to be investment, like you say, in cybersecurity. We must think about policy, get governments to work, create free trade zones, that sort of thing, right? But what is the leadership's role from a corporate perspective in being able to drive opportunities for change?
Can I go first?
Sure, go, John.
Yeah, I think I'm going first because this is my area as the chairman of the professional body here in Kenya. It's my daily challenge. How can I make supply chain more strategic in nature and not transactional and not operational? It's a behavior change. So what we're doing in contributing to this arena as KISM is actually creating, moving from just your technical skills, technical competency. I tell my people, technical qualification, which you all have, gets you just at the door. But the only way you can progress is now what I call soft skills, ability to maneuver, or I call it agility, responsiveness, being strategic mindset. There's a word I always call having mental agility, political agility, emotional intelligence, so to speak, so that you don't just stick to the technical way that you do things. You tell your boss, this is what the law says. The law says this, and it's going to. How can you apply the law without being legalistic, as it were? And how can you apply strategically? So it's a behavior change. It calls our members from moving from being just tactical, very reactive, as it were, but being more market savvy. How can you go to the market, do market surveys, and add value? I worked in Coke for almost 20 years, and I always said I was a consultant to the business. How can you become a consultant to your business? A provider of solutions. They talk about how can you become a marketing procurement person? I call them, marketing people know how to sell you air. They sell you anything. But how do they do that? They can pitch their story very well. They can sell their story, and they look like they're doing big things. But without procurement, you cannot do anything. And so I always tell my people, therefore, how can we relearn, unlearn the old skills of just saying this is how it should be done, and just learn new ways of doing things, being more again discerning, so to speak, more agile is the word that always keeps to my mind. And agility is a whole suite of things that talks about what we learn in school is very different from what you learn in real life. How do you work with your boss in a way that you are indispensable? That's only you can see you as strategic. So that, and it's not about, unfortunately, we live in an arena in procurement where they don't know you until there's a problem. They don't even know you exist as a procurement professional until they stock out, for instance. So I'm saying to my people, how can we ensure that you anticipate? Those are basics. You don't need to deal with those. Be more anticipatory, be more predictive, be more forward-looking. The word I always look at, be more entrepreneurial in your role. And that's the challenge I always throw at my professional body members. How can we develop a more entrepreneurial mindset, more business mindset that supports the business instead of a mindset that just sits there waiting for the request to come? Thanks.
Thanks, John. Right. So what I'm hearing here, this is work that you already into through your institution, KISM, and it's about skilling individuals in an agile way, right? Agile mindset, emotional agility, political savviness, all of those things kind of coming through. So skilling individuals is probably one of those things to help out with these challenges that you kind of face. And it's a focus on behavior change, shifting to the strategic mindset rather than the operational or transactional level. So taking it up a notch. And I think all of these things are actually quite critical, because if you look at artificial intelligence and robotics coming in, skilling individuals to step up to a higher level is also kind of critical. So I'm just reading into what you're saying there, John. And then the fact that you should actually be more of a consultant to your business, right? And that's kind of what stands out. Tell the business, give the business the direction, show them the direction, and create that for them. Awesome. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate that. I think, Daniel, we're shifting over to yourself.
Yeah. So when I look at the whole supply chain and the role of the procurement, but also the business in the context of global supply chains, I think key element is getting the market insights, owning the market insights, knowing what people are buying. Okay, so the procurement function has to have a very good understanding of what is happening, and the local companies should provide that to procurement functions. Okay? For me, that one would be clear, would be key. Getting the market understanding. Okay, that would be one. Another element that I think is important from a procurement, it is the potential for aggregation. Okay, what is the collaboration that can happen across industry, so that there's consolidations, and then there's bargaining power, and then we can compete. Companies and industries in Africa can compete globally, and that's very important. A little bit of coordination across industries that drive the purchasing power down, but also eventually also drive critical infrastructure investments that one single company could not do, but the industry as a whole could eventually tackle. Okay, so that would be a second one. Another one that I would think of is compute to compete. Right now, it is important that this function, and companies as a whole, but this function uses the power of computing, the power of data science to bring insights to the business in terms of okay, what is happening, what is the forecast that we see, how we can optimize the inventories. So the data science element is something that definitely the procurement function can own or have a say on. Other one would be the risking the operations that are lay under procurement, because the risk in that operations would just mean lower cost of capital, and that is key. That is a key contribution to the businesses. Any business that is able to go to the market and demonstrate that they have the risk their operations, definitely they will be able to be exposed to cheaper cost of capital, which I think it is critical. Let me stop here.
Oh, fantastic, Daniel. So I'm hearing the market insights, which links to your third point, which was compute to compete, right? How do we use our technology to be able to enable us to get the market insights to actually build the right solutions, right? So very critical. Then the second point that you kind of mentioned was coordination across industries, and I found that very interesting. So I'm just thinking back to when I did my master's. One of the case studies we did in our economics module was actually Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola's aim was to get a bottle of Coke in every single person's hand across the globe, right? And with that thinking, they created their networks and supply chains accordingly. And then we had a challenge here in Africa where we needed to get our medication out into places where we actually couldn't get to, or normal supply chain models couldn't get out to. Using the Coca-Cola model, they were able to get medications out to individuals in rural areas that most supply chains wouldn't have been able to get to. So I think that kind of talks to your exact point. And if we think bigger, if we think about coordination, we think about partnerships, we can actually solve quite a few problems in that way. So yeah, a nice drop there. Thank you, Daniel. Eric, anything to share from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think John and Daniel have really brought it out quite well. And probably what I'll just add is, from a supply chain perspective, understanding what the business is trying to achieve long term, especially from a revenue and numbers perspective. Also, they're able to look at what is the infrastructure that is in place. Do we have enough warehouses? Do we have enough drop-off points? Do we need additional partners that will help us get to that last mile? I think once that view is there holistically within the whole organization, then they can be able to plan from a strategic point of view on what they need to do from a supply chain perspective.
No, awesome. Thanks, Eric. And as you're talking about that last mile, it kind of takes us to our kind of next topic to discuss, right? And we're focusing now on Kenyans in specific and SMEs that are struggling with the last mile delivery, right? And that's kind of what you jumped onto. So we're going to dig a little bit into that. What scalable solutions can address this challenge? So I think you were kind of leading onto that. So Eric, I don't know if you want to jump first here and kind of throw out some ideas on what can help us with those last mile deliveries.
I think the time we're in, there are quite a number of opportunities and solutions or options that companies have, even as an SME. If you look at the platforms that are available, that are there to either deliver, be it groceries, be it foodstuffs. We have the Globals of the world, we have the Uber Eats of the world. So as an SME, I think they are able to leverage those platforms, which are more or less customer-based solutions. So as a customer, I'm willing to pay to get my product, and I can buy it, be it off Instagram, be it off Facebook, and that last mile is able to be catered for through these kind of platforms. So I think also what we've realized, if you realize also right now, most SMEs that, for example, sell on on the social media platforms, they have what they call their riders, right? They have contacts of what we call border riders in Nairobi who they can call to make a delivery. So just share your address and they deliver it straight to your house or to wherever you are. So I think that is a scalable solution, especially for an SME, whereby you don't have to invest in that infrastructure. You leverage what is already existing, which are the riders we have in town, and they're able to deliver it to the end customer. For the more structured ones that have outlets, they have the Uber Eats, they have the Glovos that they're able to leverage. And the thing is that these platforms have contracts with riders, so they don't have to invest on that side of things. So all you need to do is have visibility on the platform and be able to scale and have that last mile covered for you through the digital platforms that exist. So I think for SMEs, the options are wide by leveraging these platforms that exist. And also for the bigger, I would say retailers, for example, Carrefour, which has its own app, they've actually contracted riders to do that last mile delivery. So they're branded Carrefour, but they don't work for Carrefour. There's a rider's fee, and the customer pays that fee, and you end up covering that last mile for the customer.
Okay, no, thanks, Eric. Interesting there, right? So there's platforms, there's opportunities in existence. So you've checked that out, the Ubers of the world, Uber Eats, and here in South Africa, we have Uber, where you can actually use their delivery service or their transport service as a delivery service. So you can order an Uber, drop your parcel in it, and then direct it to go and deliver it to somebody else. So that's kind of an opportunity there. And you talking about Bora, I think, delivery. So you've got drivers already. They are just an organization that sits there. You phone them, kind of same in terms of the Uber deliveries that we have here. And you get them to deliver out. So there's a couple of options, it sounds like, that are already in existence, that's already kind of scaled up as well. It's just a matter of, like, in some cases, Uber deliveries took a little bit of time to get around. So it took a few months as they tested in one area and then started shifting out to other areas. So no, great. To scale up, we've got existing opportunities. Explore that. That's what I'm hearing from you, Eric. Thanks.
Yeah.
Daniel, I think you were going to go next. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that a couple of things. One, we've seen across the last decades how here there have been some leapfrogs and some jumps in terms of accelerating the adoption of new technologies. So that one eventually could be an area that we maybe see. And there's a lot of exploration and around new mechanisms to deliver. I'm thinking about drones for last mile. I mean, this is still exploratory in some areas, but eventually that's something that we may see. I think that the example that you were mentioning, Nishan, is very relevant. Leveraging existing supply chains to consolidate deliveries, I think that is a key one. Then in terms of infrastructure and network design, I think that that's still an opportunity. We are focusing on the last mile, but what about the pre-last mile? I mean, what is happening in the micro fulfillment centers, those distribution centers or those aggregation centers from which the last mile would start. Another thought it is in terms of vehicles. Eventually, there's opportunity for customized or adapted low-cost vehicles for that last mile. There are solutions definitely that will come. And finally, what Eric was saying, the whole gig economy, that is something that we have seen in working for the models, and I think that that's something that could be tapped into. And it's already working, and I can only see it growing. It can be easily structured and deployed through mobile apps at this moment, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. And thanks for that. So very interesting there. So the exploration part, which stands out quite a bit in terms of new technologies that could come into the enable those deliveries, because I think the current space is where we have human intervention, but the future could be fundamentally different, drones driving those deliveries, right? But again, your point was not just that last mile, but the focus on that entire chain, to be honest, right? The distribution centers, what's the innovation that goes into the distribution centers, or the investment that goes into that, exploration that goes into that? I mean, I've seen clips online of these potential future Amazon warehouses that just has this grid on the floor with these robots literally moving on that grid, taking items from one space to the next space for delivery. I've been in a cat warehouse, right? So Caterpillar, what would we call them? The
machinery, no equipment.
machinery.
Okay, we know Caterpillar.
Yeah. So I actually went to the warehouse in Dubai. It was a free trade port. Got into that center, and it was the most fascinating thing ever. They had technology that was driving everything in there. They only had human intervention to move stuff at a point from receiving a request through to invoicing. And this guy walks in, he has this glove on his hand, he scans the invoice and it has a code on that. And the moment he scans it, he then scans it into the computer. And then all of a sudden, there's this big black wall that kind of is behind him. And you just hear something moving behind him. And it's machinery that moves on in this warehouse, pulls the item that he was looking for, brings it out to the front, puts it on a little pallet, and then automatically the pallet moves to the point where the truck will come in and they could push that onto a truck and then take that off to the airport to ship out wherever across the globe. And his only involvement was to scan the invoice, get that item onto that pallet, which automatically was done. And once it was on the pallet, the printer printed out a label. He took the label, put it on the item, and that was it. The rest of it was then going to be shipped out onto the truck, all automatically, and that was human intervention in the process. So yeah, the future is coming. It's going to be very interesting. So thanks for that, Daniel. Let me see any more comments on that, or we can jump on to the next question. We're good, John.
Let's jump. They have done a great justice to that topic, and you said something so powerful that resonates with me. What we did in Coca-Cola, making sure you have a Coke in the remotest part of Kenya, and then how do we leverage medicine? Because we have a big problem in what we call, and Eric will know this, cancer. You got obsolescence of drugs in the warehouses, but there are people dying for lack of drugs in some other places in Kenya. That tells you there's a broken system right there that we need to fix. How do we work on that? And how do we leverage on, say, how can cancer leverage on Coca-Cola trucks? Just need to put, and we've done that a bit actually for a while, to see that we make sure we get actually right up to every nook and cranny of the rural areas so that medicine reach there. There's also something that I think related to that, and I think you talked about it, Nishan, smart warehouses. So smart, that's a real thing today, right here. How do you, with little human intervention? So I always say one statement, I tell my members that AI or technology will actually never replace human beings, but human beings with the AI technology will replace human beings who don't have. So human beings will replace other human beings. That guy got a job, maybe he's the only one who can do many things in there. And if we don't keep ourselves and reskill as they want to use, you have to use the tool and reskill our members, we'll be selected against, we'll be jobless because of technology. So we need to equip ourselves to be able to maneuver technology to our advantage. Thanks.
Fantastic. No, awesome, John. So we're going to touch on that very shortly in terms of skilling individuals, because I think that's kind of critical for us to focus on. But before we jump there, we've been talking a fair bit about investments, right? And Daniel, you brought this up right at the beginning, right? And I want to kind of jump a lot more into detail on that. And I want to ask the question, how should supply chain leaders in Kenya kind of think about investments, and how would they need to balance investment in technology with basic infrastructural challenges like road networks and warehousing, right? And then somebody also mentioned in one of their feedback points was that road networks are not the greatest, right? In Kenya, or housing or warehousing is an issue, right? So we don't have the smart warehousing. We haven't really invested in that. So how do we balance this? How do we balance the infrastructure investment in terms of the warehouses and that sort of thing versus the networks that need to actually get it out to people on that last mile? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, I can go. I think there are things that are very, I don't want to call it beyond our control. And I think it's Daniel who alluded to this earlier on. we should not just look at the last mile up in the rural areas. There's another unreachable people group called the urbanites. Urban congestion is a real threat. I can tell you that I don't know where I was recently, Kinshasa. You can die trying to get to the airport, because the road network to the airport is within probably 10 kilometers, and you can actually miss your flight because of what I call urban congestion. So again, I keep sharing the story of Indonesia with 300 million people, and Jakarta alone probably having got 30 million. They have been able to be very smart in their transportation infrastructure, building, trains up, the sky train, as it were. Then you still have a lot of express trainways, and you still get jams, terrible traffic jams. So what am I saying? There's some investment that can only be done at another level, not at the supply chain level, for instance. It's got to take the government, so to speak, to invest in that high level of transportation in terms of infrastructure for transportation. That cannot be an individual investment. And I think for us in supply chain people is to know how do we motivate or how do we drive the decisions at the policy level, because that's going to be done at that level for the investment to happen in infrastructure to ensure that we actually have accessibility within the urban areas, but also into the rural areas where the trouble there now is inaccessible roads. When it rains, that's the end of your delivery. So again, there's something that I think, it's Daniel who talked about this micro fulfillment centers. There's about something around crowdsourcing delivery, something like that. So things around those areas, how can we invest in that thing so that you don't just deliver one item, but have a consolidation or what I call, consolidation. We are doing it now in Kenya. We call it now county aggregation parks here. So that's actually going to be the aggregation centers where you can actually do specific work there before now you distribute to the rest of the centers. It's not yet there, but I think that's the future. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic, John. Thanks. So one of the key things I picked up there is that it's just not about the organizations that are sitting with these supply chain challenges. There's a role to play for government in this, right? And that's the critical thing, because the roads are not necessarily your responsibility and accountability, right? That's government creating and opening those roads for you to be able to get those networks working. And it's not just necessarily the roads, right? There's a fair bit. And even though I kind of mentioned last mile delivery, there's also delivery in terms of getting stuff to your manufacturing point or to your distribution points, right? So if you don't have the right networks on that side, just to get it to that point, it's never going to get to your last mile delivery, right? So again, I think, thanks for that. But it also then begs the question as to how do we start stimulating government? How do we get into conversation? How do we get into debate with government to drive and change policy, right? To ensure that we have now more of an investment into infrastructure. And when we have that investment in infrastructure, it'll drive the economy, right? And everyone benefits from that at the end of the day. Some great points there. Thanks, John. Dennis, no, I think it was Eric, then Dennis. Eric, you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, just building on what John said, a number of these infrastructure initiatives are really driven by government. And as businesses, in some cases, we are really not in control of that. And why I mentioned this is it can lead to now the need to look at strategic partnerships, whereby there are companies that are agile, so to use that word, in that they've built system whereby they have presence in some of these areas where, for example, infrastructure is not the best, and they actually now come to the big players to have partnerships whereby they actually become like master distributors, so to speak, and they give you presence in the areas where the infrastructure is not the best. There are companies, for example, like Boost, the Wasokos of the world, that buy in bulk and distribute using digital platforms. So a shop in, say, Migori, for example, can order off using WhatsApp. And this master distributor has many stores around the country where they can now distribute from. Now, what that does for you as a supply chain, you're able to scale faster, and you don't have that heavy investment required where you have to have that presence in all those different locations. So I think leveraging on such strategic partnerships with businesses that have set up in that way is also a way that they can be able to overcome that kind of a situation.
Thanks, Eric. So just to
add, also what these guys do is using data again, is they're able to provide lending to these guys, to these small shops, to be able to buy more. So again, it just helps drive the business in a much larger way.
Okay, fantastic, Eric. So just some of the comments from yourself and John kind of reminded me of a model that's kind of used in the Nordic regions. They call it the triple helix model. And the model works with government, business, and academia coming together. And government creates the policy and opens the doors and the channels for business to invest in academia to do the research, and the research then gets channeled back to business for development of products and that sort of thing, and then pushing that out into the ether, right? And that goes for any sector. It goes for innovation, it goes for supply chain management, it goes for marketing, you name it. So all we need is government, which is kind of the key link here, to be able to start enabling all of these things. And then the two other players, which is business and academia, to come together as well to enable it. So there's three kind of key players to grow economies. Thanks, Eric. Let's jump over through to you, Daniel.
Yes. So just adding a couple of thoughts. So we were discussing, you were asking about how we balance investment in high tech versus hardcore infrastructure. I think that we're pointing to the right direction is who's investing in what. So that is one criteria, and let me build on that. The other one, it is what has happened over the course of the last decades in technology and what is happening right now in the technological space. So I think, for instance, I remember in 2008, I was deploying an e-commerce for a major retailer in Spain, and the budget was around $5 million at that time. Those amounts are no longer relevant. I mean, the cost of technology for certain products has drastically dropped, which is an advantage. So eventually, you don't have to make the choice. Okay, that would be one idea. The other one would be all that has been done and all that is provided by the open source community in terms of technology. I think that is something that is to be considered. The third one, it is what is happening from a network design perspective in the IT space. So now that we are seeing that the data centers are not just hubs, but are just generators. No, there's a lot of generation that happens in the data centers. So you can eventually have your data centers nearby, and there's a whole data center investment that still needs to happen. So that would be my thoughts on the technological side. Okay, so open source, drop of cost, and the redefinition how the IT networks are being designed and what the data centers provide. So that's a major change to watch out. And for the other one, I would think we were talking about business, we were talking about academia and the government, but I think the key players is the pension funds. And because who should be doing what, and what are the time expectations? Those are critical things. Some money want the returns immediately, and some others, they don't need it immediately. So for those long-term investment, definitely pension funds should be looking at that from the perspective that they can hold, they can be patient, and from the perspective that they will be investing in infrastructure that definitely will allow the growth in the future. So that's definitely an agent that I think that needs to play an important role there.
No, awesome. I think that was the biggest thing that I picked up there, right? Because we haven't really thought about this. So where does that investment actually come from? And what should be the role of pension funds, right? So here in South Africa, we have what is the PIC, which is actually the biggest investor on the continent, right? Or the investment manager on the continent. They've got, I don't know how many trillions sitting in that fund, but they have, because of their profile, the opportunity to be patient. And that patience is then taking that funds and also putting into an investment that kind of matches their profile of investing, which means that they will get their returns as it comes along, and there will be huge returns because it starts driving up the economy. So no, I love that one. And that is probably something that we need to, I kind of mentioned earlier on, how do we get this conversation going between government and business, and not just in Kenya, right? I'm also kind of giving that reference to the African continent. How do we get this right on the African continent, right? How do we get our governments all together creating a policy that actually enables the entire continent? So no, great stuff there. Thank you so much, Daniel. But now I see we kind of getting to that point where we're actually not far away from our end time. Time has actually kind of flown, right? But as we get close to how we round up the session, I want to start focusing on people in all of this, because we focused a lot on technology. We focused a lot on leadership and leadership thinking and setting mindsets. Let's talk about the people. And John, you kind of spoke about this kind of earlier on as well. Daniel, you also kind of mentioned this. It's all about skilling our people, right? So technology is not necessarily taking away work from individuals. It's individuals taking away work from individuals, right? But how should we as leaders in supply chain and management start thinking about the impact of artificial intelligence, robotics, the different challenges that we face, and how do we think about people in our model, and what do we do with the people in our model to keep them relevant for as long as possible with all of the challenges we have? So yeah, would love to jump first. Off you go, Daniel.
Yeah, sorry, I'm unmuting. So definitely, when we look at the supply chain and the skills valuable for the supply chain, data has to be there. Data capacity to analyze data, leveraging the tools that are available. But beyond that, it is a critical thinking that goes along, the capacity to model things. Also, I think that design thinking is also a critical skill. But then beyond that one, I think that it's also not just the skills and the knowledge, because right now access to knowledge is just becoming easier and easier, and it's available if you want to go for it. But it's in terms of the attitudes and the mentalities, right? And one thing that I would emphasize here, from my experience, is ownership. You know, ownership is a key element in life and in business. If you say you're going to do something, you own it and you will deliver it. And so that ownership element, I think, is very important to be embedded in the youth. The continuous learning as well, very critical. We have to have the mentality that we will need, and the kids and the youth have to have the mentality that continuous learning, it is something, it's a must right now. Then learning to work with the cognitive computing that has emerged over the last couple of years. I think that could be also critical. But I think in terms of aside from the skills, is the mentality that I would emphasize.
Yeah, fantastic. And things that I'm taking away from there is not just the continuous learning part, but the fact that you also have to be learning the right things, right? So data is changing the world. The focus to understand data analytics, how to interpret data, those are all critical things, which then always impacts everything that we've kind of mentioned so far, right? But also the ownership, and that was interesting because we kind of think that it's the organization's responsibility. The point you kind of mentioned is ownership, but ownership in the youth mindset, not necessarily in the organization's mindset. So it's actually, how do you take your future in your own hands and drive that, right? Identify the right opportunities to learn and then continuously learn. So great points there, Daniel. Thank you. I think I see Eric's hand up.
Yeah, I mean, looking at digital transformation in supply chain, it also involves technical tools and solutions that they'll be leveraging. So upskilling the team or even the individual upskilling themselves from a technical perspective, I think, is really important. So those are skills that are needed today and moving forward for someone to be well equipped to be able to handle supply chain now and in the future. A lot of supply chain now involves a lot of strategic partnerships. So again, like Daniel mentioned, the soft skills are really important. Being able to communicate effectively. The environment is shifting and changing, so you need someone who's flexible and able to adapt to the environment that they are in. I think those are the kind of points I would bring out around the skills that are needed right now for the team.
No, thanks, Eric. And I think another important point there is we're focusing on the today, but we've got to focus on the today and the tomorrow. So when we're skilling ourselves, we've got to skill with that kind of a mindset. But that also kind of brings another point in that as we skill for today, is the sense that you have to unlearn what you've skilled yourself for today and relearn for what skills need to come in the future. So that learning agility becomes very critical. And I think, Daniel, you've referenced that, John, you've referenced it, as well as Eric. The ability to be able to learn where we currently are, unlearn that stuff, and relearn new. But at the same time, when we unlearn content, you always remember that in innovation, we can bring all concepts and all ideas in a new, fresh, in a new and a fresh way. So to always just remember and keep on thinking about that as we progress, sometimes all ideas can help us in the future as well, right? And then again, also importantly, both Daniel and yourself have been talking about those soft skills. It's not only just those technical skills that you've referenced there, Eric, but it's that ability to be able to connect and to communicate and to lead, right? Because that's important. At the end of the day, how we see this is that those low mundane roles, robotics is taking over. You need more higher thinking roles, and people need to skill themselves in the higher thinking roles, and that's where they're going to stay relevant, right? So again, some absolute gems there. Thank you, Eric. John, I just want to see if you want to throw anything to the pot this.
Absolutely. I was waiting for everybody else to say, well, this is my area, and big passion about this particular area. I want to start with one statement that Daniel talked about, a sense of ownership. We have a saying which used to have in Coca-Cola: if it's got to be, it's up to me. You know, having that sense of saying, if it's going to happen, then it's me to make it happen. And unfortunately, we are getting into a generation that don't take that responsibility. It's a very, very worrying trend. But having said that, there's four critical skills that I look at. It's about self-awareness. It's important that you actually, this story of Johari window never grows old for me. You know, the things that you don't know that you know that you don't know. Self-awareness is critical for today's employer, today's employee, so to speak. And ability to communicate, you know, especially in procurement, it's something we don't have very well. Well, again, I keep saying we don't know how to blow our trumpet. We don't know how to tell our story. I always tell people, when you don't trumpet your story as a procurement professional, you'll be trampled upon. And it's a real thing, because I've realized that when you don't tell your story, when you don't blow your trumpet, somebody else would never think that you even matter. You don't even exist until there's a stock out. Ability to influencing skills is another critical skill that as a supply chain professional, actually, I think anybody in that particular area must learn to know how to influence the people within your own sphere of influence, but also even above, so they get the decision right without needing to do the things that the people have to do. Then learning agility. How are we going to constantly learn and relearn and all those things? But I must talk about this particular guy. He's South African, by the way. He's very famous for talking about the future of work. The future of work is a very good, I forget his name now. During my 11th Coca-Cola, he came to talk to us in Cape Town. So, and he talked about, I want to read this properly. The future of work. He talked about 8 skills. Being able to horizon scanning. How can you big picture thinking, you know, what if thinking, what if horizon scanning, having those what if scenarios. How can you develop that ability to have I decide to know what if, that's what we call scenario planning. As a supply chain people, that's mandatory. The other aspect you talk about is adaptive intelligence and complex problem solving. That's critical. Again, I look at that and say, that's a gem for us as a procurement professional. Creativity and intuition, curiosity. Can we be curious? You know, there's something about curiosity that never actually stops. You don't stop learning. You don't reach a stage where you think you know it all. You keep constantly learning. And then having that ability to, I talked about tech savviness, tech savvy in this area. If you don't learn, again, technology, you'll be replaced by the extra technology. But if you're ahead of that curve, you should be able to. Then personal intelligence, what I want to call self-awareness. And then diversity intelligence. And then the word I love so much is being able to take initiative and having an entrepreneurial spirit. it is critical in this arena that we're going into as supply chain people to actually have an entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial in what you do. And people think that because of you're not a marketer, you don't need to be entrepreneur. Supply chain entrepreneurs are coming, and we must be there. So there's something about which we learn a lot: lean supply chain. How can you really how can we, lean supply chain and agile supply chain? Two big areas that we as supply chain people must be able to learn. Lean supply chain involves being able to standardize processes and eliminate wastage in the process. And of course, that tasks that don't add value. We do a lot of repetitive, mundane tasks in supply chain. How can we automate also? And I think you talked about that, Vishan. How can we actually leverage technology to do that? And then, more importantly, as supply chain professional, in this lean, we did it big time in Coca-Cola. I talked about stability and predictability, that word of English. How can we be more predictive in what we do? And then, especially in manufacturing industries, you need that. You need that very well. How can we focus properly and ensure that we actually have a very good input? Agile in the supply chain is another big one. Is again collaborating across departments. We are, up to date. It's about how many years since supply chain silo mentality is big. Not working in your own cocoon and being comfort zone. It's a dangerous thing. How can we quickly be able to break the silos, break the boundaries, and work together with marketing, work together with manufacturing, work together as supply chain people? That way, you can actually be able to add value in the organization. Thanks.
Thanks, John. So the one thing that you started out with, and I'm hoping I caught this right, it's good to be, it's up to me.
If it's good to be, so the other way to say that is an American way. If it has got to be, if it's good, so it's the way if it's good to be, it's good. It's up to me. If it's good to be, it's going to happen. It's going to be me making it happen. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! And you know why that resonates so much with me, because I'm kind of a proponent of the internal locus of control. So you have the external locus and the internal locus. The external locus is where you blame everything on the outside. The fault is on the outside. The internal locus of control is where you actually sit down and you understand that this is up to me. I'm either the one at fault, or I'm the one that is the opportunity, or I can take the opportunity. And it's having more of that internal drive, and a lot more problems are solved having that internal locus of control. But then you did go on to mention a number of other gems, right? How to be able to scan the horizon, see the future, right? There's, I think it was Kevin Nash, if I'm correct, that came up with the concept of game theory. So how do you start looking at what the future would be like, what your competitors are doing, create different scenarios around that particular thing, and map your way based on where the future kind of is going to go, right? So that's kind of a mild way of looking at game theory, right? Adaptive intelligence, curiosity. And I think curiosity, why that was so interesting for me, was that that's something that AI cannot replicate, right? That's still a human trait that always will keep us relevant, right? Despite the tech that you mentioned thereafter, and the tech savviness, personal intelligence, right? Really knowing yourself, personal mastery, diversity intelligence, you also dropped in there, critical. The more we bring diverse talents together, diverse thinking, diverse skills, the more opportunity for us to resolve problems, come up with solutions that will actually be beneficial to everyone. Having the entrepreneurial spirit, right? So that talks to the drive to be able to achieve, right? And stability and predictability. So I think you kind of rounded us up quite nicely there. So thank you very much for that, John. So I just want to check any more comments on that point before I take us into our last 4 minutes. And in the last 4 minutes, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to give you guys an opportunity to just round up your thoughts. What do you think the future kind of looks like? Where do you think it's going? We kind of spoken about all of those things, but just to round up your conversation and your thoughts for this afternoon. So whoever's ready to jump into that, the floor will be yours. Daniel, I see you came up on screen.
Yeah, so to me, final authority would be, let me say, I don't know if it's going to sound controversial, but the way I see it, I don't know if it is for construction or for reconstruction, if things go off track, because we have to face reality, and the reality of the world that we live in is complex, it's difficult, a lot of conflicts going on. So I don't know if it's going to be a phase of reconstruction after major conflicts. Let's hope not. But definitely, everything is to be built here in this continent. So that would be my final thought. Yeah.
No, thanks, Daniel. I think what I'm taking out of that is, in the darkness, there's the opportunity. And if we start looking at it now and we start creating that already, we can benefit as a continent, right? And maybe not just as a continent, it could be a global opportunity for all of us.
Yeah.
But
so maybe just building on that is the specific time that we live in. There's definitely a window of opportunity for the continent. It is the time. I mean, it's either seized or not, but definitely opportunity is there. I don't know. Question mark if there's going to be major conflicts before, but otherwise, we should look at a bright future for this continent. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Daniel. And then rounding us up quite nicely with a positive thinking there. Eric, I see your hand up. The floor is yours, sir.
All right. Just like to say thank you, first of all, for inviting us into this conversation. It's been great 90 minutes talking about this. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the e-commerce space, with a projection of e-commerce growing to about $1 billion in Kenya by 2029. I think that's massive, and an opportunity for SMEs to grow their business. And I think a chance for supply chains to put in place what is necessary to be able to make that happen. And looking forward to being part of that journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you. John, you're rounding us up today, sir.
Yeah. I have to quote this correctly. And your former Met President Mandela says the journey of procurement or supply chain is a continuous journey. He says after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. And we can only rest for a moment, but with freedom comes responsibility. We dare not linger, we dare not stop, because the long walk to freedom is continuing. The long walk to making supply chain relevant, the long walk to making supply chain integral in the boardroom is a crucial journey that is so crucial for all of us as supply chain professionals and as leaders, actually, because I think supply chain is one profession that cuts across everything supply chain, including the old mama in the village, she buys something, including the executive up there. Supply chain, you ignore supply chain, and I learned this in Coca-Cola. You ignore supply chain at your own peril, and the business collapses. But how can we make supply chain more strategic? How can we make supply chain up, our own profession up the game? And I say this without any fear of contradiction. We must continuously evolve ourselves and continuously learn. Again, I think Daniel put it so well. We have an opportunity. We have a window here. And if we don't take advantage of that, as professionals and as the people who are living in our generation today, we will miss an opportunity that we'll regret many years ago. But we have an opportunity to shape the future, because our question should always be, what legacy shall we bequeath the next generation of professionals? Thank you.
John, so elegantly put to round us up today. That perseverance of spirit. You think you climb the hill, but there's more challenges and more hills in front of you. And it's really all up to us. So if we bring all of that together, we are the future, and we need to lead this. And thank you so much for your thoughts, your insights. Gentlemen, you have been fantastic this afternoon. And I'm sure the audience that have been watching and observing us online will feel exactly the same. So I humbly thank you for your time, for sharing your insights, your global knowledge, your local experience, and bringing that relevance to our audience. Thank you again, and good afternoon, everyone, and enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you so
very
much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.